As the podcast coach for February 9th, 2019.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. It means it's Saturday morning. It's 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. It must be time for the only podcast where you can get your podcast questions answered live. Unless, of course, you're listening to Better Podcasting when they do their show live, when I think about that. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com. And coming in to save the day, the one and only, you know him as Stargate Pioneer. His friends call him SP from gonnageek.com or better, podcasting.com. SP, how's it going, buddy?
It's great. Thank you very much for having me. And I just want to say, when the Hall of Famer, the Dave Jackson, calls you and says, I need a favor, you say yes.
Yeah, I had somebody lined up from, I believe it's BeMyGuest.fm, who this guy has a background in PR, and I heard him on another webinar. And I've been trying to do kind of the thing where like, hey, let's have new people in. And this will be kind of fun. I'll make some new friends and blah, blah, blah. And he emailed me last night about 11:30. He goes, dude, I hate to do this, but I have a small child who is extremely sick, and I will be in the 100% dad role tomorrow. And I'm like, not a problem. And about that time, you sent me an email and said, hey, happy birthday, buddy. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? So very nice of you to sit in. And we are at askthepodcastcoach.com/live if you're listening on Mixler or the YouTubes. The other thing we found out is I was going to kick the tires on BeLive.tv today because the whole new computer, the old computer would occasionally I would just freeze. And I'm like, hey, let's give that a shot. And it turns out that if you're not on Facebook, I was going to say Mr. P. That doesn't sound right.
No, that is not correct either. No.
How would that work? SP is not on Facebook.
Not by choice, but okay.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, if you're using BeLive.tv, what did the screen say? I saw the screenshot, but I actually didn't read it.
The only thing it said is you had to click consent and then log into Facebook to continue. And that was the link that you sent me. There was also a login script on the top right-hand side of the web page, and I tried to click that, and again it said log in with Facebook. So that wasn't happening today because for those that don't know, Facebook kicked Stargate Pioneer off because I don't know, they want to monetize real names and addresses. So that's probably why that happened.
So you're saying Stargate Pioneer is not your real name?
It is a stage name, but they don't accept the stage name in it, which is really weird. So I went through this whole process with them. And the one thing that I remember is they said, well, you can set up like a public profile page, like newscasters that use staged names, do that and so on and so forth. But I'm like, no, I don't trust you linking my data back and forth. So no, I'm not going to do that. And since that time, there has been many, many, many data leaks with Facebook. So I am glad I did not make that association.
It's like, I will pass. Thank you very much. But hey, you've seen the commercials. They're not going to do it. They want this to be a place where you connect with your family. My favorite was, I think it was, Full Frontal with Samantha Bee did a thing on this, and they went back and showed where like literally like every 2 to 3 years, there's been a time where there's been some sort of no by Facebook. They put out a really nice, warm, fuzzy commercial that goes, oh, we're sorry, we're not going to do that anymore. And then it's like, and then 3 years later, oops, oh, sorry. Okay, we're not going to do that. It, like literally just every 2 to 3 years. And I'm like, yeah. So, I don't blame him. Hey, if you want to call in, we do have the phone hooked up. You can dial. Oh, wait, I forget that we have dialing music. You can dial in, of course, 330-294-9393. That number again, 330-294-9393. And, if I was thinking, I'm not even in my own chat. How weird is that? I was going to throw that in there. You also see it behind me occasionally when my head is not in the way. But boy, it's too bad it was such a slow week in news for podcasting. Nothing really big happened or anything besides that whole Spotify thing.
Oh, really? What happened with Spotify,
Dave? Well, they bought Gimlet, which for me, I'm like, okay, that might bring some people over there. I would love to know, like, what did having Joe Biden do for Spotify, and what did Amy Schumer do for Spotify? Because that was previously what they did. Now they bought Gimlet. So I kind of get that they're like interested in having really good content, and then they bought Anchor, and that's the one that makes me. Yeah, I was using the analogy of being from kind of Ohio, Cleveland-ish area. There was a guy here that was super talented, Josh Gordon, that just could not keep off pot and other drugs, and just super talented guy. Unfortunately, just cannot get his act together.
Wait a minute, Josh Gordon. It's his real name, Randy Moss.
Exactly. And he got hired by the New England Patriots. And I was like, oh, well, that's not going to end well. And sure enough, about halfway through the season, he had to call it a day because he was, again, failing drug tests. And I think at this point is suspended indefinitely at the NFL. So I was kind of like, wait, why would the Patriots buy Josh Gordon? I'm like, why would Spotify buy Anchor? That's the one that I'm like.
The only thing I could think of, Dave, because I've been scratching my head over this whole thing too. We talked about it in the live recording of Better Podcasting this week. The thing that would drive me to Anchor if I was Spotify, if I knew something about podcasting, would be the tools that they have put together to help podcasts or creators, because that's one thing that they have is a suite of tools, which I've never used, but I think it's mobile tools that they can use. And I think a lot of creators have created their free podcast using those tools. And they say, great, this is how we actually create a podcast, is we use these tools and put it up there. And then we quit 3 episodes later. And then those 3 episodes are there forever because Anchor never calls them. I think Spotify is going to look into that over time. And I think they're going to change their business practices. I don't know if they're going to shift from free or not. I would think they would, because the bandwidth of the RSS feeds alone is going to eat them alive pretty soon. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not in their mind space. I mean, people have been speculating in the hobbyist routine, because I'm in the hobbyist circles on Reddit and so on and so forth. And they've been speculating that this is a podcast farm where they can look in and grab shows that they would really like to spotlight on Spotify. Okay, maybe, but that's an awful lot of shows. It's tens of thousands. I don't think.
And I'm like, I can't think of a single show that. Of course, I use. If somebody's not using the pre-made Anchor artwork with the little symbol on it, it's hard to tell where they're from. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I did find out, because I've been playing with Anchor. I have the Anchor Sucks show, which sadly enough, they took off my sponsorship. They will not sponsor a show about how bad their platform is.
Oh, wow. I wonder if they would have done that if you hadn't announced the fact that you had the show, like on other shows.
So I've put up a couple. What's interesting is I put up one about weight loss, thinking, because they say, they have advertisers. I'm like, okay, weight loss. There should be some sort of diet pill or protein powder, some sort of, something. And the sponsor that I get for that weight loss show was Anchor. And then I created a show about customer service. All of these, by the way, have about 2 episodes in them. Shocking. And did the same thing. And the sponsor I got was Anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I created a character. Actually, I stole a character. And I do a show called Fat, 50, and Frisky. And what I found out through that is, again, oddly enough, the sponsor that I got for that wasn't like Geritol or some older type thing. It was Anchor. So again, this way that Anchor is going to make money through sponsorship was, again, just a way for them to spend more money. They've already gone through about 14 million. But what I found out is, if you don't go through and set up, they use payments through Stripe. It's kind of like a PayPal thing. And I went to Connected, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've already got a Stripe account with the School of Podcasting. And it was like, I don't want to set up another one. And so I emailed them their support. I'm like, let's see what their support's like. And I got an instant robo. You always get the robo. Hey, we got your email. We'll be with you shortly. Then shortly thereafter, like about 15, 20 minutes later, I got a robo automatic answer that said, hey, you asked about Stripe. Are any of these what you're talking about? And mine was, how do I connect it to a pre-existing account? None of those helped. And I'm like, no. To which I then got another automatic robo reply that said, hey, I see you asked a question about Stripe. are any of these things, the ones that we just showed you 10 minutes ago, I got that 3 times. Each time I'm going, no, that did not answer my question. So finally, I just went over and said, well, if worst case scenarios, I'll set up another Stripe. Let's see what happens. So I click on it, go through, put in my Stripe information, to which Stripe finally said, hey, do you know you already have an account? Do you want to connect that to Stripe or to Anchor? And I'm like, sure. And I found out that I missed out on 35 cents because I didn't have my Stripe account connected first.
Can you even buy a little gumball in those gumball machines with 35 cents today?
I don't, maybe with a quarter, and then I'd have a dime left over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was, because the whole time, and I'm reading the sponsor thing, of course, which is like, and you can make money with a podcast. And I'm like, I would log in. I'm like, no, I'm not. So I once I did that and then listened to my own podcast, I saw where I had a penny, because they're paying a penny a download for Anchor. It's 10 cents or $10 per 1,000 downloads. So I was like, here we go, on my way to
a whole penny. And in Canada, if you earned that penny, they could not physically give you a penny because there are no pennies left in Canada.
Well, there you go. Everything's just rounded up to the nearest.
Yeah, if you're paying cash, it's rounded to nickel. At least that's what Steven's told me. So I haven't been to Canada since then. But apparently, if you're doing digital transactions or credit transactions, it is still pennies.
There you go. And technically, I hate pennies anyway, because they used to be made out of whatever it was, copper-ish kind of metal thing. And now when you get an actual new penny, I swear it's made out of plastic. It is, they're very bizarre. But
probably to prevent counterfeiting. Anyway, you're saying that you have advertisement issues with Anchor. And I will say, I think Anchor's success here, and probably what attracted Spotify, is they have injected a process by which ads can be sold on podcasts. Now, what they have not demonstrated is that advertisers clomb to the entire Anchor service to then pay for it, but at least the process is there.
Right. Yeah. And for me, and I'm probably going to do a video on this later this week, my still biggest problem that I don't understand, because, okay, we haven't planned this ahead of time. SP, if you were to say, what is one thing that podcasters obsess over, you would probably say?
Microphones.
Ooh, not what I was. Okay, if you went with number 2?
Monetizing, except for not in the hobbyist circles.
I'm just striking out. I think it's stats.
Oh, well, you deal with it on a day-to-day basis. I'm over the hump where I am obsessing about stats on a daily basis or hourly basis or whatever. I'll log in when I publish my shows, and that's about it. But so, yeah, I get it. Everybody's talking about stats. Yeah.
And so the one thing that drives me, that I'm surprised people are okay with, is when you sign up for Anchor and they submit you to other directories for you, like Apple and especially Stitcher. Those two, you now don't have access to see extra stats that are in those services. And it's kind of interesting, because I'm now the guy that goes, okay, and for the record, they're very good at redirecting your feed. So they don't control it. They don't control your feed. They just control your access to the back end of Apple and Stitcher. And it's not impossible to get that back. It takes about a week, a little back and forth between Apple, where Apple goes, hey, we have to prove that you own your feed, which you do because Anchor redirected it. Please put this gibberish in your feed, because why else would anybody put this in their feed? And then we'll know that you are you, and we'll move your feed from Anchor's Apple ID to your, which takes, I'm going to say 5 to 7 days, because it takes like a day to get. You get like one reply from Apple a day. So it's like, hey, I need my thing. That's one day. Next day, put the gibberish in your thing. Next day, put it back in, send it back to Apple. Day 4, okay, you've owned your feed. Now we're going to redirect it. And on day 5, it actually happens. So,
and I will say, I've gone through this with 2 different shows, and I've tried 3 times. Now I do see the stats in Podcast Connect. The shows are in my account in Podcast Connect. However, I don't own the shows in Podcast Connect, and I've tried to get them to rectify this several times, so it doesn't show up on my Podcast Connect main page. But then when I go into the stats, I can see the stats. So it's very confusing to me who actually owns the show according to Apple. Of course, I own the shows and I
Right.
can prove it, but they haven't moved that in there. So I've gone through that process. I see the stats. I
Mhm.
don't see the shows on the main page.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And like I said, I've tried 3 times. Every once in a while it'll come up like we're talking about it now. So maybe this afternoon I'll send them another email and I'll say, look, I don't see the shows on this page. And they've never responded with a real response. Like the first time they said, yes, you have your stats and that's it. But it's still not on my Podcast Connect main page.
Yeah. The thing I thought was interesting, because I emailed Stitcher and I said, what do I have to do that? And it was interesting because I didn't explain it very well. They're like, well, what's your show? And I'm like, no, I don't need to do this. I need to know if I was going to do this. And just let us know what the show is and let us know what email you use in the partner portal and we'll just move it. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting because there's no validation process. They're just like, oh, let us know what it is and we'll move it. And I'm like,
So how many shows do you own in Stitcher now, Dave?
yeah, so yours and
Yeah.
Cliff's and Daniel's, I just grabbed them all.
I would figure you would do something that low, being the Hall of Famer, stellar personality that you are.
Yeah, so it was that I thought was rather interesting because I might be writing an article on that for the Podcast Business Journal. So just because, again, I don't think most people realize that, yes, it's free. And for the record, the thing I think that Anchor has done that's a good thing is everybody who went back to the user interface and said, how can we make this easier? Because it is drop dead easy to make an episode on your phone on Anchor and that whole 9 yards. So, and you can even use, they have this weird artwork thing where you can go through and it'll go out to, I think it's Flickr or a bunch of Creative Commons sites, and they'll actually help you find artwork, but then it will automatically put a link to the artist in your description.
Oh, see, I was thinking you were going to say Fiverr, and that would like complete the Anchor decimation at that point.
Yes, Eliquity says hello in the chat room from the land of 6 feet of snow. SP, where are you located at?
I'm in the Midwest, and yes, we've had snow on and off. I actually at the lake in Wisconsin, we've had 3 vehicles go down in the ice, and just because the lake level has dropped so much, and that's a threat. For those of you that don't know, maybe in the South or elsewhere in the world, when a lake freezes over, when a river freezes over, it's probably more relevant for a river. That's good. You still have that sheet of ice, but then over the course of the winter, if it's not a wet winter, right, it's water is still frozen, the lake level will drop. And then you will have that shelf of ice that becomes less sturdy because there's nothing underneath it to support it. And then cars or ice houses or whatever's on the top of the ice, actually, people will fall through. My dad actually fell through the ice when he was 17 on the Mississippi River in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Wow.
And yeah, he says it's the luckiest thing that ever happened to him that he was able to get out. And he points out every time, you would not be here if I did not make it out of that river. I'm like, okay, thanks, Dad, for making it out of the river. I appreciate it.
That's funny. Mr. Jeanru in the chat room says, I just want to thank SP for guesting on here. Pretty much right when he was texting me that he was connecting, the power came back on.
Yeah, so he's out in the Pacific Northwest in Canada, and they apparently are in the middle of a huge windstorm, and he's had power off since, I don't know, 1 a.m. or something like that, and they're fighting the battle. They have crews out there that are really trained and designed in order to quickly respond to all the wind conditions out there. I'm just a little surprised they don't bury the power lines, but of course there's earthquakes too. So
Fun.
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah. Don't forget, I love the jingle maker. If you have a question, you can call it in 330-294-9393. That's 330-294-9393. And I will even throw that in the chat room, which if you're listening to this on Mixler or YouTube, you can come over and join us at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. SP, I think this is a new segment. We're going to call it Things You Shouldn't Be Obsessing Over.
Things you should be obsessing over.
No, shouldn't be obsessing over.
Should not. Okay.
I think I'm going to leave the name out of this. This person was obsessing over why a review in iTunes was marked helpful. Like why is this marked helpful? And that's a thing where if somebody goes into iTunes or Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you got to say them both. Otherwise, you get your hand slapped.
Yeah, right, just stop that.
No one will punch you in the face, but Apple will slap your hand.
And I was like, because somebody said that was helpful. That's why it's labeled as helpful. And the more people that do that and the more votes of helpful it gets is how it is then labeled most helpful because more people said it was helpful. Hence,
oh my gosh, we've entered into a new iTunes review war. Oh my, I can see this happening.
Well, I saw that this morning is somebody was in one of the Facebook groups saying, can I get a link directly to my reviews? So they don't have to go to whatever, pick your Apple product and then click on leave a review. And then whatever you have to click on, I haven't left a review. I did find out you can delete a review. If you leave one, like really scathing one, and then you wake up the next day and you go, I probably shouldn't have ought to done that. You can go into your account and see your old reviews and actually take them down. Cause there's another podcast about podcasting that's new who will go nameless, but it was like, I listened to it and they're all like 3 minutes long. And I'm going to say if it's 3 minutes long, 2.5 minutes of it was a commercial. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I woke up the next day and I'm like, because I am technically their competition, I'm like, nah, I should probably just stay out of this one and let the audience figure it out, you know? And I was like, I went into the Apple iTunes and was like, oh, and then I finally figured out you can go into your account and holy cow, SP, we have a caller. I just have to make sure I've got them set to go. Ending in 1070. You're on with SP and Dave. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi, SP. Hi, Dave. This is Bangs.
Hey, how are you, buddy?
Hi.
Hey, Bangs.
Good, SP. You looking good? Getting that facial hair back soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, for those that don't know, I went through a skin cancer, and my dermatologist said, you need to not grow a beard until this is resolved. I'm like, okay, great. So it was resolved about 10 days ago, and I've been growing the beard back ever since. And then I'll probably have to shave it off when spring comes because of allergies. But yeah, thank you.
Anyway, I had a question regarding the Patreon issues that have been coming up of recent. Jack Conte was up with CNBC, and he was explaining how Patreon wasn't sustainable as it has rapid growth going forward, which is an interesting thing for the CEO to say. Well, and also the massive numbers of people who had slow payouts this last month.
Yeah, here's my question. Did you, because I watched a video of that interview, and at least on the clip they had online, he didn't say that anywhere. At least the clip I saw. Did you actually see him say that? Because I saw it reported.
That was from the CNBC article.
Yeah, see that
was a quote from there.
Yeah, that's the part I thought was weird. Is the article mentioned it, and they had a link to the video, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to watch the video. I want to hear what and he didn't. He didn't say it in the video, so I thought that was really weird. That, but yeah, because the thing I don't get about that is they almost don't have a product. Like all they really are is a
convenient middleman.
Yeah, they're a convenient middleman that takes 10%. And the only thing I can think of that they didn't think of is because people ask me all the time, how do I link Libsyn to a Patreon account? And I'm like, well, you can use the Embedly link, but in the end, it's not going to play right there in Patreon. If you actually want it to play in Patreon, or if you want it to, if you're using the RSS feed, you have to upload it to Patreon. And that will work in the RSS. And I just wonder if maybe that's the one where they went, oh, and all these people are now uploading media to their account, which again is an expense. You've got it. Not that storage is that expensive and not that bandwidth is that expensive, but it's an expense that they didn't think about. But yeah, I thought it was really odd. SP, have you heard anything about this or read any articles?
Yeah, I've just read the same articles that you have. And I was thinking in terms of like big, huge Fortune 500 corporations, the bigger they get, the more overhead that they actually have to sustain because there's more facilities, there's more personnel, there's more of this, there's more of that. You would think it would be a standard percent, but it does start to grow a little bit. So that's what I thought he was talking about. I did not think about the media upload, especially what is it called, Lens. that creators can throw little blurbs on there, like little social media things. And I certainly didn't think about uploading full videos directly to Patreon or MP3 files. I thought those were all hosted separately, but come to think about it, because I don't use Patreon. I do support people on Patreon, but I don't use Patreon. But
yeah,
since you said that, yeah, that's a big expense over time.
Yeah, I forget the versions. I thought it was odd that MP3, or I forget what it is. They have a couple different versions. Like I think video, you almost have to. What I do is I upload it to YouTube as an unlisted video, and then I put it there, and that works great. So I'm not uploading video, but I just thought it was like there's no way to embed a player, or it's like they don't, which I understand. That's the same thing for WordPress. They don't want people embedding iframes because then it just jacks up everything and it gets ugly. But yeah, I thought it was just a weird thing. I'm with you, Bangs. I'm like, that does not instill a lot of confidence when you hear the CEO go, yeah, this isn't going to work if we keep going in this direction. You're like, and I know, I think it's pod.fan.
Podfan, yeah.
Just launched, at least I don't know if they launched, but I heard about it this week and went over and claimed a URL. Don't know what it is, but it's something to play with. And then
Did you claim Audacity to podcast while you were at it?
I should have, yeah, and better podcasting.
Yeah, right.
Have you ever heard Daniel's story about me and you know how Daniel always talks about, well, blah blah blah, myawesomepodcast.com?
Yeah, right. I remember that.
Yeah, so I actually went out and got the domain. It took him like months to figure out. He's like, all right, smarty pants, please have that. So Bangs, what do you think, buddy?
Well, I don't know, to be absolutely honest. Could be they're getting investor issues because they've had several, $100 million at this point? Several million, up to $100 million of investor money invested, and they're not getting revenue to begin paying that back. The weird thing was they offered that cash up front. You have a slow pay, you need the money now, we'll give you 90% of your money, so an additional 10% fee as sort of a cash advance, which is just really sort of weird that they would be doing something like that.
Yeah, because when I see cash checking places, I think, wow, there's a reputable business. It's like, oh.
Well, the good thing with Patreon is it's not just a podcasting issue. You have all sorts of creators, could be artists, could be writers, musicians, a bunch of YouTubers, which is probably their biggest draw. And they're probably going to be the bulk of the complaints, I guess, against the platform. And we'll see if anything actually changes or not because of their complaints. YouTubers can be very vocal about such things, and they've been vocal about their own platform as well. So I don't know if it's going to change anything. I mean, if they're really running through money to keep that site going, and the take the whatever it is, 2%, 10%, whatever, it isn't enough. They're going to have to increase it
5%.
5%. What is PayPal? What is
PayPal?
PayPal is 2.9% plus something like 30 cents per transaction. So
they're all relatively in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, they're Patreon's taking an extra, 7%.
That's what you get charged from PayPal. That's not necessarily what they've negotiated on the back end.
Well, that's fair.
That would tie into what happened a year ago in November when Patreon decided to redo their payment scheme. And it ended up being approximately 35% of all $1 donations going to PayPal or Patreon.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that. I forgot about that.
A year ago in November.
Yeah.
And they added in the 30 cents flat fee. And any $1 donors to you ended up paying approximately 35%. And it only broke even at about $9 to $10 per month going to a single creator.
Yeah, what's interesting is that probably means back in November, a year ago is when
November.
Yeah, a year ago, there was probably when they went, hey, this isn't going to work. Somebody did some extra math and went, if you carry the one on that, we're going to run into a brick wall here eventually. But I know there's another one like Star Follower. Subscribe Star. Yeah, is another one. But
that's the one PayPal and Stripe pulled out of this last November because of shenanigans.
Yeah, so that's always a good first impression when two major players.
There's a couple others that were bought out. There was a company that was a white box version of Patreon, effectively, where you could label it yourself, and they ran the back end. And Patreon bought that. See, so they're buying up competitors.
If PayPal was smart, they would just take the whole reward, like a better way to track it or something like that. Like take the back end of, tracking rewards, because you already have, a recurring monthly payment. Why not have because the problem is you could use PayPal, but tracking it would be a nightmare. Although I believe in your back end, you can say, show me subscriptions, but it would still be, it's not as easy where now I can just go in and say, show me my $5 patrons. That would be, because then PayPal would be like, who's going to be able to compete with PayPal? Because PayPal doesn't have to tack on any extra fees. They already have the fees. So that would
and
be.
PayPal's 85% of the online credit card transactions are PayPal and Stripe.
Wow.
So
yeah, that'll be fun to watch. But
it's not quite. Yeah, it's not quite that large in the U.S., but internationally, it's 85% between the two of them.
Wow. Interesting. That'd be fun to watch.
I'll let you guys go.
Because I remember when the thanks, Banks.
Yep. Bye-bye.
It will be interesting. I forget who it was, but there was another company. I want to say Jaywalk or something like that Google bought right when there was Patreon, and then this other thing that began with a J. And I want to say it was across. Anyway, I was on it originally. That's why I have askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, because I made that because at the time there was Patreon and then this other thing with a J that I can't remember. Joystick? No. Anyway, whatever it was, it got bought by Google and immediately shut down, of course, because that's what Google does. And so it'll be interesting because it's one of those things where Patreon is so huge. I mean, they're paying out, millions of dollars to people. And you think, well, they're never going to go anyplace. It's the top, it's like when, Podbean has a donation model, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, Podbean has their own Patreon thing. It's like they are now the Kleenex of crowdfunding. And you know what? Since we're here and we're talking crowdfunding and awesome supporters, this would be a good time for me to say thank you to my awesome supporters. If you want to join us, we're over at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And we're talking about awesome big shot smarty pants people. I have one level where you can actually get private coaching at a greatly discounted amount. And that right now is Josh Liston from On the Bubble podcast, also part of the Gonna Geek Network, I should say. And if you've ever heard about a show being canceled and then their fans rallied and either got it back on the air or died trying, check it out at onthebubble.podcast.com. And then our $20 patrons get mentioned in every show. So we're talking about awesome people like Greg over at debtshepherd.com. If you're wanting to know more about getting your finances in order, go see Greg. Jonathan Bloom over at weeklyawesome.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. Josh Rivers, who was here last week at podcastingexperiments.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane from Spybrary. So if you're into spy stuff, check that out. Karrie Bond over at keywestperspective.com/podcast. It's all about Key West and that whole area. My buddy Ronsley down in Australia or up in Australia, depending on where you're at, from the Amplify Media Group. You can find him at mustamplify.com. And our newest $20 patron, thank you to Carl White from loanofficerfreedom.com. So if you're a loan officer, I'm assuming that would be something you would want to check out. But thank you, Carl, for your patronage. It's greatly appreciated. And again, if you want to become an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. So it will be fun to see. We with all these different companies moving things around and such, it's some of it's just going to like, well, let's get some popcorn and kick back and we'll see what happens. So
we will. There's two things that is inevitably going to change the space, if the space is ever going to change. And one is the architecture of which podcasts are distributed, which right now is the RSS 2.0 sort of way to distribute your feeds to other places. It was created in 2003. It's 2019 right now. Some would say, that's getting a little long in the tooth. It's still working though, right? So if that methodology changes, that's one way. And the other thing is, if you get more and more big exclusive content that people really, really, really want to hear on these platforms, then they go to the model that we're having right now with TV, where you have Netflix, you have Hulu, you have Amazon Prime, you have HBO Go, you have all the different ways to get your exclusive content. And if the public is okay with that, you're see more of an acceptance of that over time. But I'm still thinking, as long as those RSS 2.0 feeds distribute content to multiple places, then I just don't see that exclusivity really taking hold. But that's just me.
Well, and that's where this article with Alex Bloomberg and Alex and the other guy known affectionately as the other guy at Gimlet said that current shows, so if you like Reply All and Startup, are going to stay, or they're not going to be exclusive. And it was really worded in a way that kind of, because to me, I think what's going to be interesting is, okay, Gimlet makes a Spotify only show. Gimlet was making money through advertising. The advertising was of, I'm assuming, a high rate because of so many downloads. Well, if you now cut out the RSS feed and I can't listen in Overcast, I'm not listening. There's a bunch of stuff that, Audible has tried that, where they won't call it a podcast, but they've had, Audible only stuff. And I listened to one because again, here we go with word of mouth. Somebody said, oh, you should listen to this. And it was the behind the scenes of porn. It was something butterfly, but it was about this guy that invented Pornhub of all things.
Oh my gosh, Dave, we really need to get you a date.
But it was really interesting because much like Anchor came in with a free version, Pornhub came in with a free version of porn, and they're interviewing all these people like, yeah, man, we can't, the minute I make a porn movie now, because that's where I was going to go for side hustle money now. It's on the internet. So, but other than that, I never listened to any of these Audible exclusive stuff. So, and I listened to Amy Schumer once or twice, but again, there's another one, Amy Schumer, the first season started off, I think, exclusive, and then it was on iTunes, and then her second season's back to being exclusive. So I don't think this exclusive thing is,
well, let's backtrack a little bit, right? So your boss, well, first of all, you said you were going to do porn for a side hustle. So let's just make that clear. You weren't talking about yourself, right?
I was considering my horizons, where I could go. And then it dawned on me that I'm a 54-year-old old white guy with a dad bod. And I'm like, you know what? Probably not the best career move at this point. So
no, there probably is a market for that, but not really monetizable. So let's just leave that alone. Okay, so the next thing that we need to talk about is your boss on Libsyn's The Feed podcast every month publishes statistics which are aggregated from all of Libsyn's. What do you guys got now? 55,000 different shows, I think.
We have a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so it's statistically relevant. And 65-ish%, I'm not remembering the exact number, but 65-ish% are consumed through Apple's architecture. And that's probably not including some of the apps, which also pull from that architecture. Right. But so it's 65 or more. And then Spotify is number 2, but they're still 10% or under. I don't remember the exact number. So if you're going to have a show exclusively on Spotify, you are ignoring the 65% plus that's through the Apple architecture and anything else. So you're ignoring like 90% of the potential audience out there. I just don't see that as really monetizable. But again, if the public wants to consume audio that way, which I don't think they do, but if they do, then I'm wrong. But I think the audience likes consuming products wherever they are.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think what we'll probably see, and this is just a guess. I bet it's going to be something like this. If you want to listen to Reply All the minute it comes out, you have to listen on Spotify. Otherwise, it's like a great example of this is The Walking Dead or The Blacklist. If I want to watch those TV shows, I'm either, I have a cable subscription or I have whatever, NBC.com or whatever, something, because AMC, which I think is really weird. I have AMC on Hulu. I cannot watch The Walking Dead. I can, but it's going to be a season. Like I will, let's say they're on season 2, which they're not, but I could watch season. I'm always a season behind. So whatever new season they're on, I can watch last season.
I don't think that's a bad thing with Walking Dead, but
yeah.
That's just me, my personal thing in there. Because whenever you really like a character, they die. So what incentive are you giving me to watch this stuff anyway?
But that's why I like that show, because you never know who's going to get whacked. But I think that I could see that doing that, like, hey, which would be interesting, because especially with something like Reply. See, I don't listen to Reply All, but I hear it's good and it's about the internet. But I'm wondering if it's too technology based, that would be really easy for that show to be outdated. Like, I don't know if it's a new show. I didn't need to go listen to it, but I know any kind of, like, depending on what the show is, if it's not evergreen, if it's whatever 2 weeks behind, okay, do I want to listen to a new show that's 2 weeks behind? That's not going to work. So it'll be interesting to watch. Just for those of you keeping track at home, if you were screaming at your dashboard in the car, it was Joyride was the tool that was available. And I'm showing on my screen, the little J there was the logo for that. And that was originally what I was using, because everybody else was using Patreon. And I went, well, let's try this other thing, because, I like to play. And so for those of you that were like, it's Joyride, come on, say Joyride. Well, okay, it wasn't whatever I said it was, Jaywalk or something like that. So there we go. The mystery's been solved. Have you heard about Cast? Oh, this is always a fun one. castq.io.
No, you got me there, Dave. Is that something new on the scene?
It is new. And so what we're going to do is, how are we doing on time? Perfect. It's an interesting idea. It reminds me a little bit of SoundCloud, kind of, but not really. And the idea is you go over as a podcaster and you say, hey, I'm going to do an episode on such and such. What do you think I should do? And I'm like, oh, it's so, let me see if I can grab this link.
So wait a minute. You have an existing audience and you're asking them to engage in your creative process.
Right. So like right now I have, at the end of the month, I'm going to do what is your absolute number one pet peeve? I know we can all pick about 50 of them, but like, if you had one that makes you unsubscribe, I would need your answer, by the way, by February 22nd. You can go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact. So I was like, hey, there's an example one that I'm actually doing this. And I went over, and what I kind of look at this and go, it's a blog post with comments. So I made one, and here's my top pet peeve. I'm like, hey, you have to pick one. And there are buttons there to share stuff. There's a comment box, it says post a question. So somebody could say, oh, so I'm interviewing SP about, on the next episode, what questions do you have for SP? I get that. But other than that, and then people can say, oh, that's a good question, ask that. So people can vote on the questions. If you go into, can I log in? I am logged in. Edit podcast. Here, new episode.
Why does it say Audacity to podcast there?
So here it's like, am I doing guests? Am I taking suggestions? There's not much to it. To me, when I saw the actual product, I was like, I like the idea of having something that you could use to solicit feedback, but I don't know. I always hate this, because when something new comes out, I always seem like I'm negative Nancy. But for me, I was kind of like, why wouldn't you just, I don't know, use your email list or use a Facebook group or a Facebook post, or I don't know.
I would think where the people are consuming the product is where you'd want to go for that sort of information. So if they're consuming it through an app like Overcast, then there should be a comment section there where they would go in and do that. If they're on a computer, it's more versatile, but how many percentage of people will actually listen on a computer? Not much anymore. Yeah. So if it's not directly in the app or in the show notes, I guess if it's in the show notes, they can click over to it, but they're not going to go there on their own.
Right. Yeah, it's some place where you're going to have to send them. And I guess for me, I really thought it was going to be like this cool interface, like click here to leave an audio thing, like it was going to be a speak pipe, click here to leave a video, or click here to, type your answer. And when I just saw this, I'm like, oh, it's comments. You're basically every quote episode is now a blog post and people can leave comments. And I just went, and this is where to me, I'm like, if people are going to be leaving comments, I want that on my own website because Google might look at that and say, wow, there are a lot of people commenting on this blog post. This must be important. And maybe, I don't know, but you might get a little more Google juice out of that. I don't know. I looked at it, I'm like, well, it's an interesting idea. I like the idea of how can I get, suggestions from my audience. When I saw the final product, and again, this is brand new. This is probably something that came in via my email. They're like, hey, here's the new podcast thing. And I went, I feel bad when I'm always like, yeah, no. And I'm like, because it seems like most of the time I go, yeah, no.
So I'm going to put my Jim hat on now. Good. And I'm going to say, I like the fact that we're seeing innovations in the podcast space for capabilities like this. Now, this might, because Cast Q might not actually take off and might fold eventually, but I like the innovation because it then gives the other players in the space, whether it's where you host your media, Podbean or Liston or your own website, or where you're actually consuming the product on an app, whatever app that is, if you're on Android or if you're on iOS or if you're on Windows OS for another few months, it would be nice to have those capabilities available in the areas where your audience is interfacing with your show. They'll interface on social media. They'll interface in the app that they're listening. And I don't know if too much of the audience goes back to the website anymore. Dave, I'm not going to necessarily put you on the spot for hard numbers, but let's say 5 years ago and 10 years ago, how many comments were you getting per episode? How many comments are you getting per episode now on your webpage?
That's a great point. Comments used to be a big thing. In fact, people were turning off their comments because they got too many because there were a lot of bots and things like that. But yeah, it's back then you would get, a comment at least or two, even if it was just to say great episode, from somebody, because people were doing it for the backlinks. And now it's a ghost town, basically. On occasion, I will get, where before I would maybe get multiple, like maybe, I don't know, 5. 5 would be a decent number. Now I get maybe 1. Then it's usually something like, do you know the link to such and such doesn't work?
Yeah. And how many comments do you get via social media or direct to you via email? Because you publicly release your email.
Yeah, that's it. I get them all. The email. And I think in a way, your audience learns you in a way. So I get definitely email is the way I get most of my comments. And then I get a fair amount on SpeakPipe because they'll go to the contact page and go, oh, and they'll click on that. And then I'll get a message that way. But social, here's the thing. And this is what's horrible. I might be getting things on social, but I'm like, I check Twitter like maybe twice a week. So I will miss that. I have also
wasn't going to call you out, Dave, but I've noticed him.
Yeah. Well, that, and I messed up my Twitter for about a month. I was playing with Recur Post and I already had Social Jukebox. And I thought I turned off Social Jukebox because I want to play with Recur Post, and I didn't. So I had 2 automatic systems just blasting.
Did you get thrown in Twitter jail?
I did not get thrown in Twitter jail, but I'm just thinking if I was following me on Twitter, I'd be like, this guy never posts anything himself. It's all just look at episode number 28 from, 7 years ago. I'm like, oops.
Yeah, actually, I was on your Twitter account yet. Well, I was on my Twitter account, and your post from your feed, forget what that's called, showed up, and you linked an episode, and then you said in brackets it was from 2007. So yeah. I'm assuming you're posting that because it's still relevant, but that is a concern. And I'm glad that you put the date on there too, because people realize that's not this week.
Yeah. The best microphone or the best media. Yeah, that would be bad. Liquidy says, what social media software is good for reposting and is cost effective? I know there's a plugin for WordPress that's like repost old stuff. I forget the name of it.
I don't have one because I don't believe in that. I want to interact more personally with my audience.
Yeah, I use whatever. It used to be Tweet Jukebox. Now it's Social Jukebox. And I believe now I have it set to do one a day. Because I'm with SP. I'm trying to make that a little more personal. And I'm just wondering if anybody's left over.
See, yeah, if I'm a new listener to your show, School of Podcasting or Better Podcasting, I'm going to go to the feed and I'm going to see what's going on. If I'm going to School of Podcasting the way that you've got it set up right now on your Twitter feed, which I believe, is it at School of Podcasting or Podcast School?
My Twitter is at Dave Jackson.
Okay. So go to
branding. I'm horrible at that
stuff. So at Dave Jackson. And I'm seeing these posts saying what episodes I should listen to. And if I'm really into the subject, oh, this is great. This is great. And then after a week, I'm like, well, wait a minute. This guy, and then I start figuring out this guy has over 650 episodes. Yeah. Wow, this is great back catalog. And then I go to the app and I download the titles that interest me. But I don't necessarily want to keep subscribed to your Twitter feed because my Twitter feed is jammed up as it is. And so I unsubscribe. So it works to get a new listener in, but it doesn't really engage with your current audience.
Yeah. It's like, hey, look, it's Dave on Twitter. And then after about 3 days, you go, yeah. So yeah, I actually have, I forget the name of it now. I'm using it's kind of a CRM / thing. And what's cool is I can tie it into my Facebook and my Twitter. So I can actually go there and see, it actually also ties into your Gmail. So I can actually log into this thing, see my Gmail, see my Twitter and my Facebook, and actually then contact anybody who's been personal messages or whatever, things like that. I'm drawing a complete blank.
Sounds pretty neat.
It is pretty neat. It's plus it's one of those things where I got grandfathered in like years ago and never used it, and then decided to like, hey, I should do that. But what we should do now is say hello to whoever is calling in with your phone number ending 7792. What's your name and what's your question?
This is Clay from workingcows.net.
Hey, buddy.
And I was just wondering, had you guys talked about the Rode Mics contest, the podcast contest at all?
We have not. If you go to, if you just go to Rode.com, I'm sure it's on their front page. But yeah, they're giving away $150,000 worth of equipment. I'm dying to get the Rode, or the new one. It's the pod mic. It's going to be interesting because if you look at the details of that, it doesn't go as bassy as most typical dynamic mics, and it doesn't go as, for lack of a better phrase, trebly as the other one. Have you seen anything SP or?
Yeah, I've been tracking this. It's called the Rode Pod Mic, and I've been tracking it pretty hard. And at first, when we didn't see it, when we didn't get any specs on it, I was like, well, I was cautiously optimistic. Now that I've seen it, both the price and some of the tech specs on it and stuff like that, I am actually thinking that Rode once again missed the mark with this thing. Now, jury's still out. Nobody's actually, it's not out in the wild. I haven't seen any reviews or tests of it.
Right.
But I'm just thinking if you equate it with the similar microphones that it's going against. So the, what is it? The BCD-1 or the Golden Age D2, I believe, the Art D7. Yeah, Art D7. Those microphones, which are large diameter dynamic cardio broadcast microphones, but they're sub $200. None of them to date have had really good luck of coming out with a good quality sound. I would prefer going with a Shure SM58 or SE Electronics V7 or a Blue Encore 100 than I would one of those microphones. I just don't think they actually sound good at all, but we'll wait and see for when they come out. I just think that with the Rodecaster, no, what is it? The Procaster with the Rodecaster. I thought it was right next to me. It's $229 or on sale, maybe even less. I think that's a great microphone to step up into. I don't believe that this pod mic is really going to hit it home as far as the actual sound quality out of it. And I think other things that are either less or equal in price will be able to give you better sound than that. But like I said, we'll wait and see.
Yeah. Do you know what the price is going to be on that? I haven't seen it.
I want to say $129.
Yeah, see, that's I can see that because it's like you said, SM58, hard to beat, and you can actually beat that microphone if you want to, and it will still work. So I just was surprised when I saw the specs and was like, wait, that's, on one hand, yeah, you're not going to have that low rumble, but on the other hand, it might sound, and I'm sure they're going to say it's designed for the human voice, so we don't need those super bass tones, and we don't need, but I'm like, yeah, but everybody else does. And I'm like, I don't know, we'll see. And it's supposed to have the, a no need for a pop filter front end, for lack of a better phrase. Which
you know what I say to that?
Yeah. Is that a BP40? Is that what you're using?
No, it's Audio Technica BP40. Did you say Heil or did you say Audio Technica? Okay,
BP40. So
yeah, it's Audio Technica BP40. I've had this for a while. It's $350 microphone, and I'm giving it one last shot. I'm gonna use it for a couple of months, really dial it in, and then go head to head with the RE320 again, and we'll just see what I pick. I'm missing my baby. I really am. It's right here. I haven't put it away. It's gonna stay on my desk, but. For those of you that are listening, I was petting my Electro Voice RE320, but this microphone, it depends on your voice, right? So this microphone has a certain tone to it. The RE320 has a certain tone to it. I'm sure the pod mic will have a certain tone to it too. So there might be a voice where it fits.
Awesome. Hey, did you say
still there?
Yeah. Do you still have do you have another question?
Yeah, no, I was leading into my question. I just recorded my entry, and I was wondering if you were going to be a judge. I know them right at the end of your show today, but if you were going to be a judge, would you want some, like a music bed under it? Would you want just raw voice? What would you want if you were a judge in that contest as far as the entry is concerned?
Oh, good point.
Because there's going to be hundreds of entries. I know that.
Right.
I would want something that
500 get a mobile interview kit. The first
right.
500 entries get a mobile interview kit, so they're expecting a bunch.
Right. I would want something, quite frankly, whether it's music or not, I would want it to be engaging and entertaining. I would want it to be something that's interesting. I would want it to be like a driveway moment. And if you haven't heard that term before, it's you're driving home, you get home, you're in the driveway in your car, and you keep listening instead of getting out of the car and going in and eating dinner. So that's the sort of engagement that I would think would win this, because they're going to have hundreds of entries.
Yeah.
My mindset on the recording of it was to record it as a teaser for future episodes. And because they said, we want you to leave us wanting more. And so my mindset was to take my niche and record it as a teaser for future episodes, but do it as close to what an actual episode would sound like as possible.
Yeah, because it's what, 2 minutes or less, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So whatever it is, that first
super hard.
That first 15 seconds has to like just come out and grab them by the throat, or just make them go, whoa, what am I listening to? Or whatever. What's not going to work is, basically one of these. Welcome to the show. Glad you got to have
Oh, you just recorded your entry right there, Dave. Are you going to submit that as the Audacity to Podcast entry?
So
Daniel's going to kill me. Sorry.
Yeah, like what? So but here's the good thing: you're submitting something, and a lot of people will think about that and go, "Oh, 150,000, that'd be great. I should do that." And then whenever this thing is over, they're going to go, "Oh, I never." So that's the cool thing. You're actually going to submit something, because I bet a lot of people are thinking about it, but you're actually doing it. So that's the cool thing.
I would equate it.
I think for the time.
No problem.
Yeah. I would equate 2 minutes, and I didn't put a lot of thought into this because I just decided I wasn't going to do it. But if I was equating it to something, I would equate it to a voicemail. Because if you ever listen to another podcast, like a voicemail that goes beyond 2 minutes, it's really boring in that 60 second to 120 seconds. So you're going to have to captivate somebody all throughout the entire thing. You're going to have to give them a lot of information along the way in order to get from point A to point B. But if you're thinking in terms of how do I bracket it, how do I frame it, think in terms of a voicemail. And if you leave longer than a 2-minute voicemail for another podcast, they're probably not going to play the whole thing.
Yeah, so I think the question is going to be, I'll have to go over and look at the rules, Like, does it have to be 2 minutes or is it up to 2 minutes? Because that's one where if you...
Yeah, it said 1 to 2 minutes.
Okay.
What I saw was 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah. So that's one where it's like, you know, if it's only a minute, 15 seconds and you're like, I don't have another 45 seconds. Maybe you don't need those 45 seconds. As long as it's not boring, you know, let it get going.
I'm a pastor by trade, so getting me to shut up is the problem.
That's dude, I'm with you on that. Hey, SP, what is coming up on Better Podcasting? Any ideas what's coming up in the future?
Yeah, so Monday we're actually releasing a great episode, which includes some talk on Spotify on it. But Stephen went into depth into a topic that was very important to him right now, and it's change. It's everything to do with changing your show. It's a topic I think we've covered in a couple of other venues before, but we just wanted to tackle it head on, especially if it's after the new year and you're thinking of changing things. Yep, that is definitely what you need to do, is look into how to do it with best practices, basically. So that's coming up next week.
Awesome. On the School of Podcasting, I'm going to interview somebody who almost quit, and she's so glad she didn't. And that's 5 seconds of silence.
You know, you and Jim should invent the 5-second silent dance, because, you know, you dance at the beginning of the show. When the show ends, you should do like a you know, I don't know, like a cheerleader, like handshake, slap thing or whatever. And it just lasts 5 seconds. That way you guys know that 5 seconds is up.
The hand jive, something. I don't know. If you have any questions, we are still at 330-294-9393. That number again, 330-294-9393. Very happy that I had this today. I was actually thinking, you know, this phone thing may not make it in the future because it does cost me a smidge, a little bit of money every week. And I'm like, people just keep doing the chat room thing, like, what's the point? As much as I love the, like, is the caller there? I'm like, if they're not there, you know, what's the point?
Man, you're just bleeding cash now on this show. You've got the call line, you've got
and the chat
chat room. You got the droopy shock mount on your RE320. I mean, dude, it's just falling apart over here.
There's a blue pill for that. If you have a droopy shock mount, it's that'll work. But yeah, actually, why I wanted to switch to BeLive.tv, it's $25 a month if you pay monthly. And I'm like, well, I'm already paying $20 a month for chat roll.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, let's just ditch chat roll, put out an extra $5 and go to BeLive. So I was like, all right, let's give that a shot. And I did some tests with it to see if it would lock up, and it only locked up once. Again, why? I don't know if it's my internet connection, maybe. And it was really quick and it came right back. And I went,
so it's still locked up with your new computer?
With my new computer, yeah. And it was really super quick. And it was just me. The thing that kind of bugged me is they let you do these private stuff, but you still have to, it's weird. It's like, it's private, but it's live. And I'm like, no, I don't want to make a video anywhere. I just want to. So what I did this morning is I just fired up the interface, threw my camera in there, put me in the broadcast, and didn't hit broadcast. And it was fine. And it's like the few times I've tested it, I've probably got about 3 hours of watching me do nothing now, and of which it locked up for all of 2 seconds.
See, that's extras that you can put on your Patreon. If somebody really wants to watch you do nothing for 3 hours,
that's it. You can. There you go. So, yeah. Let's see. Somebody that if Patreon would offer some sort of physical reward fulfillment, there you go.
Physical reward. Well, they kind of do. Like if you are a certain level of Patreon, the creator can say, we'll give you stickers or we'll give you a shirt or something like that. I've seen that, especially in the sailboat channels. They love that sort of stuff.
It just, you just end up spending more money on shipping than you do on the button.
Yeah. See, that's what I scratch my head over that, because they are spending a lot of money to do all the, especially sailboat channels, because they're in different countries. So they have to deal with the shipping of stuff. Either they have somebody back home, like a parent or a brother, sister, or a really good friend that's taking care of it within the United States, or they're spending a lot of money shipping that around. And still, if it's in the United States, they're still spending gobs of money on that. So I'm not quite sure where the break even point is for a lot of these rewards, because they're offering big rewards.
Miss Eileen says that Jack Conte was misquoted. And she's got a link there to a crowdcast where Jack says, no, we're very sustainable. Which is, like I said, I thought it was weird that on the page on CNN that says he said this, they have a video interview of him, and I watched it, and he never said that. And I'm kind of like, wait, where's this quote coming from? So,
Okay.
yeah, but I could see them. I'm surprised they don't. I think they've partnered with people for like t-shirts and such. I thought they did, maybe.
Oh, to give give reduced prices for people that are, well, maybe. But then there's a whole quality issue. Like if you don't like the quality of the product or whatever, then you got to go somewhere else. So I don't know. I've not run into that issue. I don't have a Patreon, and maybe someday I will, but I don't now.
Well,
so
that's a great point. I saw somebody in a Facebook group that said, "Hey, I'm thinking of launching a Patreon, and do you have any tips on that?" And I said, well, basically, from what I've seen, it's usually content you can't get anyplace else. So it's exclusive content, it's ad-free content, something like that, or some sort. I've seen some people that'll do like a free Zoom meeting. That's one of the things I do, but it's typically stuff you can't get someplace else. Ad-free, I guess I could see, but to me that just sounds like a whole lot more work. But and then somebody said, how many downloads do you get? And he said about 200 an episode. And I said, so expect about 6 people. If you're doing really, really good, expect about 6 people because of the law of 3%, which is depending on, actually I have a link to that, by the way.
Yeah, I've seen more, I've seen less. So it really depends. And the less, by the way, is always from somebody that's on Anchor or SoundCloud or whatever. And so to the best of my knowledge, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I've looked, I don't think either Anchor or SoundCloud are IAB compliant.
Not that I've seen. I know SoundCloud is so not.
Right.
Because you can buy SoundCloud plays.
Right. And I'm pretty sure Anchor is the same way. And that's something else Spotify is going to have to clean up ultimately. Can they do it rather cheaply? I mean, it's not going to be overnight, but yeah, they could shore that up. I don't know about the certification part because you guys are still going through that at Libsyn and I wow. Yeah. I mean, I've been audited by, at work, I've been audited by different organizations that come in and audit, and that's a pain. I can't imagine doing podcast statistics for like millions of downloads, perhaps billions. Yeah.
One of the things we're doing, I don't know if this is public, I could get in trouble for this, but we're actually putting 2007, we've been doing this for months since November of 2017, we've been reprocessing 2017 stats so that you can have a little bit of history now that it's 2000. We're hoping. Yeah,
that would be nice. Yeah. I've gone back. I think, what was it, like November 17th or something like that? The new stats started a process of 2017. I mean, if you go back and look at your stats right now, your new stats, it goes back to like December or November of 2017.
So that's what you said, billions. That's the problem. It's billions of downloads that you have to recalculate. Steven asks, am I going to create a tier for videos with the middle-aged dad bod? That could be a big money maker now that I think about it.
Oh my God, Dave. Yeah, I guess it could, but I don't think there's that big of a market for it. I think it's a real niche market.
When I stepped on the scale today, it actually just said it's a digital one, which was interesting because yesterday it said happy birthday because the scale noted.
Nice. By the way, happy birthday. I didn't get to say it on the actual thing, but happy birthday. You are now years old.
54, yeah. So this today I stepped on it and it just said too much cake. That's all. It didn't even show me how much weight. It just said too much cake, dude. So
curious, it said that?
No, I wish that'd be nice. That'd be hilarious. But it was not happy that I ate too much cake.
Yeah.
It was here's the thing. I went out with my brother and he said, we started off, he took me to this cool place. They have they cook everything within a wood burning oven kind of thing for pizza.
Oh, yeah.
So everything's got this kind of smoky taste.
Wood fire, I believe, is the term that they use.
Yeah. And so we got pizza as an appetizer.
An appetizer.
Yeah, so we started off with pizza, and then I got a bacon covered, for lack of a better phrase, pot roast that was quite yummy. And I was like stuffed at that point because I had one piece of pizza that was the size of my head, and then this pot roast thing and potatoes. And they're like, okay, what do you guys want for dessert? I'm like, seriously, I'm done. And then they got some sort of hot, gooey apple whipped cream thing in a cup that I then ate. So I was like, I knew the scale was not going to be happy today, but it was fun. Also, Eliquity, since she's out in the West, I am coming to Utah. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get an extra day, but I'm going to the Utah podcastsummit.com, I believe is the
in Salt Lake.
In Salt Lake, yeah, it's at some college, and in fact, that's one of the things I need to do today is buy my plane ticket.
Well, have you ever been out to Utah, Dave? Before?
I have not. I've been to Colorado. I think is as west as I've been, and that was beautiful.
Are you perhaps going to Provo? Just out of curiosity.
I don't. It's well, here, let me pull up the website.
Because this is something that for those that have never traveled to Utah, alcohol, because I know you're the partying dude, alcohol is not free flowing out in Utah.
Oh, well, that's not a problem for me. Yeah, this is they've updated the page since I was here. But it's at utahpodcastsummit.com, and it's at this college. So it's in the Karen Gale Miller Conference Center. And this is part of, I think it's, see, they've changed the page since the last time I was here. Yes, it's at the SLCC. So I'm going to guess Salt Lake Community College.
Oh, okay. Miller, so not BYU.
Yeah. So, but,
okay.
But yeah, they've updated this since
yeah, she's saying it's not near Provo. But still, they really have really funky entertainment laws out there. Like last time I was out there, which was a long time ago, they wouldn't show any R-rated movies, and I think PG-13 movies were even hard to find. So
really,
yeah, they take their morals seriously in Utah. Really.
Well, that's because being so morally inept. Of course, with my.
Let's just say, your career in Pornhub is probably not going to take root in Utah.
Yeah, that's I actually many moons ago, when I started the Building a Better Dave show, that was one of my most popular episodes was instead of Mormons, it was Amish people. And I said, if there's no electricity in Amish people's houses, does that mean there's no Amish porn? And then I pulled all sorts of double entendres that were pornish, but yet Amish things like, Zebediah, plow my bean field.
Apparently the Amish kids these days, they get to have their smartphones because, regular phones are just, they're a thing of the past, really. So the way they communicate is through smartphones. So that is their kind of concession to modern life is they have those smartphones.
Here's a fun question. This was from Preston D. Lee. Does anyone know if there's someplace to sell a podcast? I have 2 shows I'm no longer able to continue, but they've got subscribers and a good foundation of episodes. Any ideas on that one, SP? I'm like, well, I know you can sell domains on GoDaddy, of which I've had 0 success with, because that's one of the things I don't know how I end up even with that service, but it's like, because I have for example, I have battlingbands.com. 2006, I had a podcast where I would pit 2 bands against each other. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool domain. I could see somebody picking it up, making an actual contest. Nothing, 0. And I'm not asking like an arm and a leg. And in fact, I think I used whatever GoDaddy was like, hey, this domain's probably worth this. And I'm like, okay. And so I have yet to do that. But I guess I would ask my audience. I would just put it out. Hey, thank you so much for the show. Due to whatever reasons, I'm not doing it anymore. If you would like to host the show, I would be willing to sell it to you. I don't know. Do you know of any places that, or have you heard of anybody selling a podcast? Or
there has been a lot of comments over the course of the years. I mean, people want to sell their comedy podcast that gets 300 downloads or something like that. And it's like, okay, no. Yeah. It's not worth it. I know Daniel, he bought a domain once, not the podcast, but the domain. And he was able to redirect that because the URL came with the RSS feed basically. And he was able to redirect that to himself. And he said he got some listeners from that, if I remember correctly. Once again, that's Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast. I was kidding that Dave was stealing his show throughout this entire show. And Daniel, if you're still listening, I'm sorry, man, but it was just a running gag. So I don't. If you get enough listens that it's monetizable, whatever that roach is, if it's 500, if it's 2,000, if it's 5,000, and that is listens within 30 days of publishing per episode, not all the episodes you have out there, not the episodes that you've published in a month, but one episode, 30 days, 500 to 2,000 to 5,000. And those numbers are loosely based on information that I've received over the years, based on what ad buyers can get for you. I mean, Rob often says on the feed that 5,000 is the campaign level advertisements. 500, I've heard on your show, School of Podcasting, a few years ago, you were interviewing somebody that said, yeah, about 500 is as low as we can go if it's a really engaged niche audience. And like 2,000, that's where I think like the Patreon can really come in, whatever. So I'm thinking if you broach one of those mileposts, it might be worth picking up, but then you'd have to do a ROI. What am I expecting to get back from this in the long term? It's the same sort of ROI. Like, should I advertise on Overcast? Should I advertise on Facebook? Should I do those advertisements to other podcasts? And you really got to think, well, how much is a subscriber worth to me? Is it worth $3? Is it worth $8? Because that's the range, right? So if it's worth something in there, then what is the ROI on those listeners that you're going to have access to, or that you take over? Now, if it's a hobby and you're just trying to compensate the people for giving it to you, and I've actually gone through that a couple of times, and there was money that was exchanged once and not another time, and it wasn't a lot of money, by the way. It was more than just pay off the price of what they had left on the stuff on the URL and on the Libsyn account. I think that might be worth it. You got to do those sorts of trade-offs.
Yeah, and that's goes back to me, one of the original questions you have to ask yourself is, why am I doing this podcast? Because if I'm going to put money out for this, I better figure out, and in some cases, like, well, this is a hobby, and so is bowling, and bowling isn't cheap. It's, you're looking at $20 if you get some really greasy fries and a brew along with your shoes and everything else, and you bowl 4 games. You're putting out $100 probably by the end of the month. And so, and nobody bats an eye at that, by the way. Nobody goes, oh, I'm in a bowling league. They're like, ooh,
I know. And you're at the bare minimum when you bring up like bowling league. So if you're a golfer, you're in the thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands of dollars if you have a golf membership. If you're into fishing and you have a boat, you are definitely into the tens of thousands of dollars. If you are into snowmobiling or ATVing or race carring or 4x4ing, shooting, if you're into that, you're talking thousands of dollars. Even I know you have a bike and I know you cycle, and I know on the bike pass, you probably get past, or you pass people with $10,000 to $20,000 bikes, because that's what's out there. I mean, this stuff gets expensive, and for people to scoff over, oh, you mean I have to pay $20 a month for my hosting? I'm like, yeah. And if you try to do it free on your own through your own website, it's going to cost at least $20 a month, because you got to pay for the hosting costs and all the plugins and everything else. So I don't get it. I don't get what the stigma is of, oh, I got to do this free, other than you're probably talking to a bunch of college kids that have nothing better to do.
Well, that's it. And it's, again, we go back to the old, there's 2 ways to pay for something. You're either going to pay for it in time or money. Take your pick. And if you've got a ton of time because you don't have a job or whatever's going on, or you're young, and, by all means pay in time. But if you've got a budget, I always go back to just the days when I had a serious Mountain Dew habit, and I worked at a company. So there's 20 days out of the month I'm at a company where I'm teaching, and I would walk in and buy a 20-ounce bottle of Mountain Dew that would get me through the morning. And then on my way back from lunch, I would go right by the same thing and buy a 20-ounce Mountain Dew to get me through the afternoon. It's $1.50 each. So there's $3 a day. That's $60 a month I was spending on Mountain Dew, and didn't blink an eye at it because it's only $1.50, And so that's the one where people go, I don't know, $5. And I'm like, Yeah. So, but on the other hand, I've also been the guy that stared at the vending machine and went, gas money or Mountain Dew. So I get that. And those people, I say, don't start a podcast. Don't. If you're in that boat where you're like, I'm like, yeah. And it's not, don't podcast ever. It's maybe not now is the time to start a podcast.
Right.
Because a lot of times those people are like, I want to start a podcast and I need to make money in 6 weeks. And I'm like, probably not going to happen. So there you go. Darwin says I gave up happy hour to pay for my podcast.
That'll do it. Beer is expensive, and I've been there too. By the way, it's not like I'm saying I've never been there. I've definitely been there, but yes, I'm not in the mindset of I got to do fun things now. You really got to watch your budget these days, or otherwise you end up in so much financial trouble. And then you go try to buy a house a few years later, and you're like, "What's this on my credit report?" And no, you don't qualify. So yeah,
I guess my worry would be about buying a podcast is how many people, like, let's say, you and Steven are like, all right, you know what? We're going to go buy a boat and we want to fish. So we're not going to do our podcast anymore. We're going to sell better podcasting. Okay. You've got to build an audience. You have a website, everything like that. But even if you put 2 new people in and they're going to talk about microphones and hobbyists and everything you guys talk about, it's still not Steven and SP though.
No, it's not. I'll give you an example. I mean, there's plenty of examples out there. I was listening to How Stuff Works podcast for a while, and they have changed hosts over there. And I think it's gotten better over the years. But one that's more relevant to me and people that I interact with. And if you're interested in Star Wars at all, and Dave, I know you're not, but maybe some of your audience is, there's this podcast out there called the Cantina Cast. Well, the hosts actually had a breakup. And the main guy who has the podcast, his name's Mike Rondu, he wanted to continue not only the podcast, but then he created a network, the Earglue Media Network. And he brought in not 1, but 2 new hosts. He did it in a handoff where he brought on one host, then he brought on the other for a couple of weeks, and then he left. And the show, I think, is better in the end. Mike, please don't kill me for saying that, but it is better in the end to have the 2 guys in the seat now. And I think as the next Star Wars movie comes in, they're in a much better spot to take advantage of things. So it could work to the advantage, right? To change up hosts as it goes on. The Tonight Show, there's another great example. You've had a change. I know you watch late night comedy. They've had ups and downs with that, but for the most part, it's been on an upward swing, right?
Yeah. And I think it's one of those cases where you're going to have some people that'll just stay tuned in because they want that content. They don't care who the host is. And then some people are like, oh, I like the other guy better. And they're going to go find something else to listen to. And then they're going to be brand new people that come along and go, wow, this is a really good show. And probably listen to the old episodes and go, who are these guys? So, yeah, I think it's one of those things where again, one of those things we might overthink a bit. But
do you keep those episodes out on your feed or do you pull them maybe into Patreon exclusive?
Yeah, there you go.
Because I've got that deal with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. So the first, whatever it is, like 14 episodes is the original host. And they are definitely explicit. And I was okay with that. I was even guesting on a couple of episodes at the time. But now that I took over, we made the decision to go to a clean podcast. So I took those episodes off of my feed. They're still in Liston, actually. They're just in draft mode. I don't know if you've talked about how to do that in the past or not, but I could publish those to a specific destination and have them available in Patreon for an exclusive or on my website or something like behind a paywall or something like that. I could do that. I just don't want them out there because they're explicit. And I don't want that to mar my clean rating on my podcast.
Yeah. It doesn't fit the brand at this point. So
yep.
Very interesting. Yeah. So I know Mignon Fogarty, if you notice all the people at on her better, I forget her network, Quick and Dirty Tips.
Yeah.
Because it's Grammar Girl and Nutrition Diva and all that. None of those have their picture on them, by the way. Like Grammar Girl is a cartoon because and she said this publicly, I don't want to be Grammar Girl when I'm 70. She's like, so eventually Grammar Girl will be somebody else. And sure, it won't be, Mignon, but it'll be the same content. And she's kind of made it to where it's like, we'll be able to switch. In fact, she has switched hosts. There was, I forget one of them, but she told me, she goes, oh yeah, this one person just after like 4 years was like, okay, I'm kind of done being, whatever, the fixer upper dude or whatever it was. And they just got a new fixer upper dude and kept going. So, but because it's not so branded on, it's the Dave Jackson fixer upper dude show. It's just the fixer upper dude. And it's like, okay, we're still talking about fixing up and things. And I'm a new dude, but today we're going to talk about how to, whatever, use a stud finder. See, now we're back to porn again. This is just everything.
That's not a porn. My gosh, dude, you are not handy at all. Stud finders are awesome. Matter of fact, they can tell you where pipes are. They can tell you where electric lines are.
That's funny. Anyway, SP, thank you for saving the day, my friend. I deeply appreciate it.
Anytime. And you haven't called for so long, and then you just call out of the blue, and I'm feeling kind of neglected, but it's still a great opportunity to come in here and catch up. My only regret is that Jim wasn't here to catch up with.
Well, I guess he was in the chat room.
He was taking a break with his high schoolers, and he came in to chat a little bit. And I know he's going to watch this later. So hi, Jim. And I'm glad I could keep your seat sort of warm. And I say that because it's just getting colder as I sit here outside.
And I might have the guy back from BeMyGuest.fm. I'll have to see if he wants to reschedule for next week, because that'll be the 16th. And then
I think you should, because I didn't get to say this before, but he doesn't have a baby. It's not a podcast killer, I think, and he's not a podcaster. So I think, give him a break and bring him back on. I think you'll really enjoy him.
Because I know the last week of the month, actually the first week of the month, which is when Jim is coming back. Jim comes back in March, and the first Saturday is March 2nd. I will not be here. I will be in Brooklyn. I'll be in Brooklyn.
I was born in Brooklyn.
You were born in Brooklyn?
Mm-hmm.
And I also found out that if you say, am I going to get shot in Brooklyn? That's offensive. I did not realize that. So, but if you're a old white guy who's really not got out of Ohio a whole lot, and you just watch TV, when you hear the phrase Brooklyn, you kind of go, you have pictures of every cop show and lots of murder. Same thing with Detroit and Chicago. I just figure you just like, you as soon as you pass the welcome to Brooklyn sign, gangbangers come out and just pop you right there.
Oh my gosh, Dave. Wow. Yeah. That's going to do the area tourism bureau. You might get a takedown notice for that.
It turns out that's not true. Actually, Brooklyn is now filled with a bunch of yuppies, from what I understand. And it's
expensive to live there.
Yeah, it's a really nice place to live. And my buddy Monica Rivera, who grew up in the Bronx, she's like, no, the Bronx is where you get shot. And she goes, and for the record, that's not true, because I'm still here. So she's like, quit watching TV and
are you watching the Marvel movies? Because New York gets destroyed every other year there.
That is true. So how many times have you watched the new Avengers trailer?
Avengers trailer quite a few times. I do a Marvel podcast, so I'm more interested in Captain Marvel right now, but I know as soon as I see Captain Marvel, then Avengers Endgame is going to be really focused, and it's going to be the end of the era that is brought in since 2009, because we were expecting the departure of several characters. Don't know exactly who. I mean, Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, said he was going to be stepping down, but we'll see what happens there. In the meantime, Captain Marvel, who's a female Air Force pilot, I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be interesting, because it takes years to make these movies, and eventually, Tony Stark can't be long in the tooth. Well, I guess he could, because he's got that cool suit, but it's going to be different if it's like, Captain America's like, let me raise my shield. Oh, the bursitis is acting up.
Actually, that's a thing in comics. Old man Captain America. It's definitely in there. Or old Steve Rogers. Cool, yeah. So, but it started in 2008. This is 11 years later. Just imagine even the most successful TV shows out there, running 10 years or so. This is at the end of their run. Now, Marvel's not going anywhere. They have other things on the docket, but this will be the end of everything. So they're even talking about putting in a intermission, which, thank God, into a 3-hour movie. I would really appreciate a 20-minute intermission.
Come on, just so we can all sing, let's all go to the lobby. That'd be awesome.
I think that, there's a trade-off between how many more concessions that you're going to be able to buy, and then how fewer movies that you're going to be able to show in a day. I get that, but if you're doing a 3-hour movie, you're only going to be able to show 4 or 5 movies a day anyway. So I don't know an extra hour thrown in there is really going to do for you. But yeah, we'll see where it is. There's some big movies coming up between April and May. And yeah, I know you're not the biggest connoisseur of those sorts of things, but they do bring in a lot of dollars.
Go to them. I just kind of like I didn't go to Aquaman, although that's a DC thing, right?
Yeah, it is, but Aquaman is the most prolific, or it's the highest revenue generating DC movie now ever.
Yeah, interesting.
So has that done all the Batman movies and Superman and everything, and is now Aquaman. Of course, ticket price has gone up.
I'm always amazed that like it seems, and I could be wrong, but it seems like the good guys usually win. I'm just noticing a slight trend on that. Where it's like,
have you seen Avengers Infinity War?
Yeah, that's why I love that movie. I was like, oh my God, holy cow. Yeah. So yeah, no, I go to them. It's like to me, and if you like, I've been into Dan Miller's Story Brand, and he talks about how like all copywriting is basically like, if you look at the Sham Wow commercial, that's a classic example of like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. This is horrible. And you're going to have, this, or if you take any kind of fast cooking thing, you're a horrible parent because you're feeding your kids crap. Look at this awesome device and look, healthy meals. And so here's the problem that you don't do. If what happens, so you have the hurdle, and then here's the solution, and then 3 easy payments, and you just kind of like, wow, that's a formula. So when I see, a chick flick, you're like, oh, these two hate each other. I bet they're going to be, at the end, they're going to get together. There's a thing on now. I want to say some sort of FBI movie, but it's one of the females from The Walking Dead and some really hot dude. So you have 2 really attractive people who don't like each other at all, and doggone it, and snarky remark to you in the preview, and you go, oh, it's Moonlighting, which was Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, who, oh, you horrible. And then 3 seasons later, they're in bed. And I'm like, okay, so I know 3 seasons from now, those 2 are going to be hooking up in the FBI office or whatever it is.
All right, Dave, we spoke before about getting you a date, and, your ability to enjoy chick flicks is going to impact you being able to go out on dates. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be every week, but Valentine's Day is coming up. So you just got to be thinking in terms of chick flick.
I like chick flicks. They're just, again, in the same way that superhero movies are predictable, typically, except for,
Talking about Sybil, I was just watching Chances Are, and Robert Downey Jr. I was just watching Chances Are. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, chat room, thank you so much for being here. I'll be here next week. Same time, same bat channel. And SB, everybody find him over at betterpodcasting.com and, of course, gonnageek.com. So thanks, buddy.
Yep. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
See you.